Hello and welcome to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic, and today we'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 6, Yesterday's Heroes. So grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in with the episode summary. Tom, Kaz, and Peyton, and Sarah are talking about how Dranica's threshold is a portal to the past, and how they should keep it a secret, and that Kiru is Kawor's ancestor. This sparks Kaz to postulate that Maxor's ancestor could have been an underworlder, which prompts Tom to visit Nadrin. Tom sees Acreon and Ornithor battle at Lake Kenepo, then catches up with Nadrin. Nadrin says, "You'll find the answers you seek, I'm certain of it." Then, Tom ports to past Kiru City and finds the village covered in scorch marks. He meets a younger version of Nadrin and his assistant, Afjak. Then he meets Vlar, a thief and an ancestor of Maxor. Vlar blackmails Tom into helping him steal some crystals from Call by holding onto Tom's scanner while Kiru barters with Call, because Call kidnapped some overworlders to work in his mines. Vlar gets caught, but he gets away. This makes Call back out of his deal with Kiru because it seemed like a diversion. Then Tom ports back to current Nadrin, and they discuss that Nadrin knew the whole time that he met Tom in the past, and Nadrin doesn't want to give Tom the power to change the present by giving him knowledge of the past, even though he may want to. And isn't that suspicious? So, on to analysis. This episode directly builds upon the last episode. Like, Hotek's Codemaster match is required viewing for this episode. Like, in order to understand why Dranica's Threshold is a gateway to the past, you have to understand how we got here. And that all happens in the last episode. But right off the bat, Kaz catches you up with the very first line, "I can't believe Dranica's Threshold is a portal to the past." Boom, you're caught up. And it's true. But this episode leans into the overarching theme of Chaotic that is like, don't judge a book by its cover, and take interest and nuance to discover things. And that's exemplified by Kiru being an ancestor of Kaor and Vlar being the ancestor to Maxor. Vlar describes himself as a thief, not a liar, and I think that's an interesting delineation to make because, right, it's proven right, Vlar didn't lie. He just steals and escalates the conflict with Call. So let's see where this character goes. What do you think about that delineation? Like, you know, is a thief and a liar, are those two different things? But in this episode, we learn that Nadrin has known all along that Tom meets him in the past. And it's canonically sound? Yes, it is canonically sound. The first time we meet Nadrin is in episode 2 of season 1, where Nadrin saves Tom from Nothalax and prevents Tom from scanning him. And they encounter each other a couple times. Tom ends up scanning Nadrin in the Eye of the Maelstrom episode because Nadrin decides he trusts Tom enough not to spill any of his secrets. So, like, Nadrin never acknowledges that he knows Tom before or that they met before, but why would he? But also, since they don't really have a formal introduction, right? Like, it's more of a lie of omission. It just never came up. Like, why would Nadrin bring up, "Hey, I met you in the past," unprompted? Like, that, he wouldn't do that. And so they also never have like an introductory moment of like, "Hello, my name is Nadrin." And so they just kind of know each other. They meet, they just kind of know each other until they build up the rapport that Nadrin trusts Tom enough. But it's interesting that Nadrin trusts Tom before this Dranica's Threshold incident because of all of Nadrin's past interactions with Tom, those are justified by Nadrin just saying he decided long ago that he would never speak to Tom about that time, and so of course he wouldn't bring it up. But you would think that Nadrin would wait until after whatever events go down until like he trusts Tom enough to scan him, because Nadrin says he doesn't want to give Tom information that could change the past, but having a Nadrin scan could, right? Hypothetically, Tom could go to the Betadrome and like farm for memories, but I do think Tom respects the trust and the rapport that he's had with Nadrin, and that is what prevents him from like abusing the scan that he has and like going and digging for memories. Plausibly, Natron could have known all along that he met Tom in the past and just not brought it up. And that's fine, and that's canonically sound. Another question that the time travel presents is what kind of time travel is this? Like, is it Back to the Future rules? Is it Harry Potter 3 rules? What are we doing here? It doesn't appear to be a closed loop because Nadrin is, one, fearful of changing the past, but we've also, like, seen in the past that there are alternate potential futures with Rodden in season 2, and so I think it's totally possible for them to alter the past and change the future. But I think the loop is secure enough that past Nadrin experienced is what Tom is experiencing in the present. And so they're avoiding a paradox by not changing any of the past. Like, as a plot point, I think it's smart for them to avoid a paradox in that way, especially for the target demographic. Like, time travel gets confusing, and keeping it simple, you know, we're not telling a time travel story, we're telling a story about the past. But this also confirms that Nadrin is like old. They say Curious City was founded thousands of years ago, and so Nadrin has to be at least 1,000 years old, and that is a long time. And that's what I have to say about that. So let's move on to lore. We get a little bit of the time travel rules of time traveling through Dranica's threshold. Drops you off at a random location, but at a specific time set back in the past. So there's timeline consistency there every time they travel back. Time has still moved forward in the past. And so Dranica's threshold sends you back a set amount of time. So, like, if time passes in the future, it sends you back a set amount of time, so that time has passed in the past. But we also see that it sets you off at a random location where, Tom ends up in the Riverlands instead of the land of Vorks like last time. And so that's interesting. It sets you to a specific time, but a random place. And once you're in the past, you can use modern scans to navigate around Param and stay in the past. And in the present, you can use scans from around Param to navigate the present, but you can't use scans from the past to time travel to the past in the present. You have to specifically go through Dranica's threshold. And we learn this because Peyton says that he was in the present and he tried to use his scan of past Curious City, but he ended up in modern day Curious City. And then we also see, right, Tom goes back in time to the Riverlands and then ports to Curious City and ends up in Curious City. It really distinguishes time travel from location transportation, right? Those are two different things. Traveling through space and traveling through time are two separate ways to travel in the chaotic universe. Now, we also learn a little bit about the past and the politics of the past. We learn about Call, who is a giant lava creature who raids other creatures, other tribes, and forces people to work in his mines. Now, I think it's interesting to compare him to Vorks, who we met in the last episode. They are both giant elemental creatures who roll over one location and seem to not only have right their elemental abilities but have elemental control over their location. Right when Call gets angry, the volcanoes erupt. When Vorks gets angry, the whole water unit steams. And I think there is a trend of these past creatures being like rudimentary elements and how that's expressed. And there are creatures like in the modern day that are elemental, like Magmon or Ilks or Zapater or Ikatosh. But the scale of like the fire overlord or the giant water creature is quite different. And so, like in the past, we've seen Call as a giant lava creature, we've seen Vorks as a giant water creature. There's an air creature who works for Call. And so all we're missing in the past is Earth, and I think that's interesting. But also, like, this season plays into elements and elemental types, and we'll see that more in, future episodes. But I think it is something to point out now. And I also want to point out there is a map that Nadrin points to, and like even that map is fairly elemental based because, there's the water region of Works and there's the lava region of Kull. And so this like map is also very elemental because the creatures are very elemental, and that's just what's going on in the past. And we also kind of learn that there are hard boundaries between these locations. Like Tom and Vlar take like 6 steps to fully transition from forest to lava pit. And like the scenic change is like absurdly abrupt. And I think that's funny. And so that must also be something that changes in Param is how these locations like transition into one another. But I do think we also need to talk about, right, Kiru is confirmed Kaor's ancestor, and Flar is confirmed Maxor's ancestor. And it's neat history, they kind of look like each other. But like, what does it mean? I don't know. We also learn Nadrin is old. Nadrin is in the past, he's in the present, he's in the future. So on to fun facts and other notes. Nadrin says, "What dire crisis brings you to my castle this time?" And I think that's funny. Like, there has been a pattern of every time Tom goes to Nadrin's castle, it's because of an emergency. And so I thought that was a funny line because it's true. Another note I have is Tom is asking about Maxwell's ancestors, and we've met 2 now. We have Vlar, but then in the Codemaster Krellin episode, we met Chromax. And so I think that's an interesting distinguishing factor between prehistoric Param and ancient Param. Like Chromax is a prehistoric ancestor of Maxor, caveman energy, versus Vlar is living in ancient times. I just think that's an interesting distinction to make. Another note I have is this episode ends with very pointed questions from a non-diegetic voiceover from Kaz, and he says like, "What secret is Nadrin keeping? How will it affect Tom in the future of Param?" And this is like the only episode that has done that ever. And so you weren't really thinking about these questions, but now that Kaz brings them up in the non-diegetic voiceover, you are like, hey, something is fishy there. Like that last sentence Nadrin just said, it wasn't fishy, but now maybe it is fishy. What secret is Nadrin keeping? Like, I think that's interesting that, if they let that moment breathe, you would still have that same question, but it's clearly a business decision and not an artistic one to like, boost engagement, boost weekly viewership or whatever. I don't know, I feel like it takes you out of the moment. I do think it's like fairly comical. I just think we needed a beat. We needed, right, we needed Nadrin to say his last line, take a breath, let it sink in, and then Kaz can ask his questions. And so, moving on to final thoughts. My final thoughts on this episode are I think this episode is fine. It does the job. Is it life changing? No, but like it's a nice story. And I do appreciate what it sets up in terms of tools in the toolbox to play in the universe of Chaotic. And like it, builds suspense for what reveal might Nadrin have in store. But overall, the episode is fine. I do think I don't understand Tom's obsession with learning about Maxor's lineage. Like, okay, so Maxor has an ancestor who's a thief. Like, so what? Vlar is his own person and Maxor is his own person. It's just like, what's your deal, Tom? And let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think in general. Is there anything I missed in this episode? And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.